Okay, so now I got to deliver, right? I'm going to talk about innovation, if we can just put the slides up on the screen. So, I might disappoint you with the first statement. I'm not going to talk that much about AI because for me it's just another technology. Now it's more powerful than probably most of the things that we've seen so far, but at the end of the day it's basically a challenge for how we run companies to reap benefits from AI. AI is not the real challenge, and you know, some of you might know me from having started together with my co-author and friend Yves, the business model canvas. We created some other tools. But what we've seen over time is the leadership, the processes, and how you use these tools is how we create value from technologies. That might sound trivial, but it's actually not. Now, one of the advantages I think that I have is I get to work with the world's leading companies top down and bottom up. So in the last couple of months, I've been working with Honeywell leadership and L'Oreal leadership. That gives me kind of a top down view. What do they struggle with? What do they know? What's, you know, hard, what not so much? But then also the bottom up, working with teams and then also being inspired by startups, right? So I see from very large companies to small companies because there's so many who started to use these tools. Now, with my company, we try to innovate. So we're trying to give away our secret sauce. Everything I learned, we tried to package in these playbooks and hand them on. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit around the innovation playbook. That's one playbook composed of several. But before I start, I'm actually going to get you to work today. Who of you thought you came here to listen and not work? Not going to happen. I'm Swiss. We make others work, okay? So, what I want you to do, just for a minute, very short minute, I want you to reflect on innovation. On innovation. I just want you to talk in groups of two with your seat neighbor. Pick a seat neighbor. What is innovation? Define innovation in 1 minute, okay? And everybody needs to talk. Whoever is not having a conversation is going to miserably fail with innovation in the future. Okay? So, let's go. 1 minute. What is innovation? Okay? Just have a conversation. Have a quick conversation. Thank you. Appreciate Okay. Let's do this together. So, I'm not so much interested in your answer, but I'm curious about what did you talk about? So the reason I asked this question, it sounds very trivial, but when we say innovation, often the first thing people think about is technology. Technology is a means to an end, right? So, but who of you did talk about technology? It's okay, because it's a means to an end. Okay? Who of you actually talked about customers? Users, customers, right? Same category. Who of you talked about the team, the stakeholders, the employees? No? Who of you talked about society? Creating value for... Who of you talked about creating value? Creating value. Okay, so there is no right and wrong. It's not like natural science, right? What is innovation? But the way I kind of define it is creating value for customers in new ways, creating value for your company in new ways, maybe new business models, Creating value maybe for your team in new ways, because happy people will create more value. Creating value for society in new ways. Business models that actually have a positive impact. Okay? So, at the end of the day, what's the common denominator I talked about all the time? Creating value in new ways. So, what we're going to do now is have a look at three things. I'll try to kind of get through these three. I probably put too many slides. The first one is the biggest challenge of any established company. As soon as you're not a startup, what becomes a black hole is the business you're running. Many companies, they just say, I don't have time to innovate. I have no money. I have no capital. That's a wrong mindset. But I'll show you how you actually need to do both. The second one, I'm going to show you how leaders who are really good at innovation don't believe in the best ideas. They have a hypothesis-driven approach, so they experiment a lot. And then after, I'm going to show you this idea of outcomes with playbooks a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. And I'm also going to make it competitive, so I brought some Swiss chocolate. Wow. Fresh Swiss chocolate. But you have to win it. So one person is going to win it, and since it's a big box, you can share, okay? So, how does innovation work? It always starts with an idea. It could be a technology. It could be a market opportunity. It could be an asset you have. So Amazon had a big, infrastructure. So instead of just doing e-commerce, they started with Amazon Web Services to sell the infrastructure. That was an asset that they started with. Okay, it doesn't always have to start with the customer problem. Then you search for the right solution. Product, value proposition, business model. Once you found that, after this search, you scale and you run the business. And scaling could be to 50 people, 100 people, 100,000 people. Who of you has ever heard of Nestle? Used to be a startup 150 years ago, okay? Now today it's not a startup, so most of their time, Nestle will spend time here. But the same is for small, medium-sized companies. They spend a lot of time running the company. So we have time here, we have key performance indicators, KPIs. Now here's the challenge. Most established companies, they take what they know from here, running a business, and they apply it to innovation. But these two worlds are very different. This is a world that looks more like the startup world. It's a different mindset than this one. And there's no value judgment, they're just different, okay? They're different. Now, what we're going to look at, we call this explore and exploit. And academics often call this the ambidextrous organization, but I left academia a long time ago to work with businesses. If I use the word ambidextrous, a lot of my business people will run away. So we just say explore, exploit, okay? So we're going to play a game if the internet works with us. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to give you 3 terms, and you tell me, does that term go into exploration, innovation, exploitation, running the business, or does the term go into both worlds? Okay? 1, 2, 3. 3 categories. So let's see if we can make it work. We'll discover. Pull out your phones. And as a reminder, you're competing for Swiss chocolate. Not Belgian chocolate, the real thing. Swiss chocolate, okay? So, let me see. I'll switch here up. If this works. Okay, so we already have a couple of you in. So, as I told you, I'm going to give you 3 terms. And each time you just need to tell me, does it go in explore, innovation, exploit, running the business, or does it go into both? Now here's the thing. The faster you answer, the more points you get. And there will only be one winner in this room who will have bragging rights to be at least the most knowledgeable innovator, okay? So it's not just about Swiss chocolate, it's about pride as well, okay? So let's go. Speed matters. The faster you answer, the more points you get. The first question. Business plans, business cases, project plans are a useful tool to plan exploration, exploitation, or both. Business plans are a great tool. Okay? So, what do you think? Okay. So, 22 got it right. We have the rest of you, 54, who got it wrong. Business plans are the death penalty of innovation. Business plans are actually the best way to maximize the probability of wasting a lot of money. Why? Because we invest in an idea. So if you have an idea and you write a business plan and now you're asking an investor for money and the investor gives you money to execute the business plan, what are you going to do? If I give you $10 million, if I give engineers or scientists $10 million, what are they going to do? They're going to spend it on building something. So we'll execute the plan. What you need to do in innovation is experiment to figure out if it's a good plan, and you'll be willing to throw away the plan very fast, okay? So business plans are a great execution tool. They're a terrible innovation tool or startup tool, okay? And I'll get closer into that. Second one. Analysis, analyzing an idea. Asking, is this a good idea, a bad idea? Thinking hard about the idea reduces risk in exploration, exploitation, or both. Analyzing an idea to figure out if it's a good idea. Looking for all the data. Searching. Is that good or bad? Okay. So I'll admit this was a trick question. Analysis is good, always. But here's the thing. Most established companies, and sometimes even startups, will overthink and under-experiment. If you're innovating, you're doing something new, there is no data to judge if it's good or not. You don't know. You haven't been in, who of you has been in the future? You have. Okay. One of you. So if you haven't been in the future, you do not know if it's a good idea in innovation. In exploitation, yes, your experience of running a company, building a business will help you execute. But in innovation, how can we decrease risk? We talk to customers very quickly. We try out things before we spend on building. Sounds trivial. Most engineers and companies, and in particular established ones, will build something first and then figure out, oh, there was no customer interest. Who of you has ever been involved in that idea that looked good on paper, you invested in it, either as a leader or as an investor, and then it turned out to fail? Okay, like all of us, okay? And whoever doesn't have their hand up is probably not honest or hasn't done it so far, okay? So, halftime report. Halftime report. Who is, okay. Sarav? Who's Sarav? Hands up? Okay, you have a target on your back. Everybody's hunting you for Swiss chocolate, okay? So, we have one chance to get close, and then we have 3 more questions later on. It's easy to distinguish between good and bad ideas early on in an exploration, exploitation, or both contexts. On seeing if it's a good idea or bad idea. Knowing if it's a good idea or bad idea. This is not a trick question, but I think here we should get more right ones. So if it's truly innovation, you do not know if it's going to work or not. Who of you in the room is a CEO? Okay, now here's the challenge for CEOs. If you have an idea, you think it's going to work, right? Yeah. What is the problem with the CEO's baby, with their ideas? Nobody's going to tell the CEO their baby's ugly. Okay, it's dangerous. Now, you have some very rare CEOs who are not delusional. I'm a CEO. I'm always delusional. So I need my team to do the reality check, right? So in innovation, and I'll show you the mechanisms to actually invest, you don't know if it's a good idea or not. So it looks like we have a new leader. Okay, it's going to accumulate. Okay, MSD, hands up. Okay, you now have a chance to win, but we have 3 more questions later on, okay? So, not done yet, sorry. Okay, so, why am I showing this? So, with all of the leaders I work with, the last time I showed this actually to the CEO of L'Oreal, I show them how this world is different. When we run a business, predictability is higher, which means we know the customer, we know the value proposition, we know the supply chain. There's never zero unpredictability, right? Because we have COVID, we have, the White House, and so on, okay? That was an attempt to make a Swiss joke, but I know our humor is not very funny, okay? We have good tennis players, but our humor is not very good. Actually, that's not true. Talking about humor, you know who the funniest Swiss is? Anybody know? Trevor Noah. Okay, you would not classify him as a Swiss, but he has a Swiss father, okay? Just in case you didn't know. So, in innovation, uncertainty is really high, and we need to admit that, so we experiment instead of planning, okay? Now here's a big one for investments, and it's the same for big and small companies. Here we make big bets because we need a big return and we know it's going to work. Often here we make big bets, but we shouldn't. What we need to do is, like in venture capital, I think some of you are venture capitalists, we make small bets, but we kill a lot of ideas very quickly. So I'll show you how to do that. Which means now, here comes the leadership challenge. For all of us who lead a company, here we ask the traditional questions: on time, on budget. Here, it's what did we learn? Should we kill the idea? Or should we change it and continue to invest? It's a very different mindset. But here's what's important. As a leader, as a CEO, sometimes I need to take the execution mindset. I'm running the business. And then 2 minutes later, I'm talking to my product team and they're innovating. I need to change the questions and the KPIs in my head. Not a lot of leaders are consciously toggling between the two. Okay? Some are, naturally. Bracken Darrell, who used to be CEO of Logitech, he consciously, toggles. Jeff Bezos consciously toggles between the two. Others don't. No names shall be revealed. But now, how do you manage that? So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a big company and then a small company. So here's a big company that said we need to do business small innovation. And this gentleman here, Uwe, was tasked with trying to get Bosch, a very conservative German company, to innovate. So this was his task. Now, they eventually succeeded to come up with 19 potential winners, and then they pushed it a little bit further. But to get to 19 winners, how many ideas do you think they invested in? So the question to you now, and I want you to discuss for 30 seconds, really short, did they invest in 19 ideas to get 19 winners? Did they invest in 43, 108, 214, or 926?
9 winners.
Discuss with your team for a second. Over 3 years, okay? Over 3 years. But remember, who of you has ever been to Germany or worked with a German company? Bosch is a very conservative company. So if you say 900, look at the numbers here. You basically say they burnt 100 million euro. Because I'm not saying explore ideas, it's not free, it costs money, okay? So discuss for 30 seconds. What do you think they did? With your team, with your group, with your table. How many ideas did they invest in to get 19 winners? Just 30 seconds, let's go. Okay. Who would say it was 19? German conservative company. Who would say 19? Okay, we got one person who says 19. Who would say 43? Okay, so a couple of you. Who would say 108? Okay, you clearly have never worked with a German company before. Who would say 214? Okay. Who would say 926? You better go to Germany once. Okay, so the reality is they were pretty bold. Okay, they were pretty bold. But think of it. They have 400,000 employees and they're making almost 100 billion in revenue. even, like what they should do is about 1,000, but I didn't ask what they should do, I asked what they did. So they were pretty bold. They did 214 over 3 years. But here's the thing, and this is the important lesson. They gave them 3 months, and the 120,000 euro or dollars was mainly the time of people, no out of the pocket. It was the salaries of people. But what did they do after 3 months? They asked, what's the evidence that this is a good idea? And they killed, after that, 65% of the projects. So you'd ask, well, why would they start 200 to kill 65? Because you don't know. So what was the task the team had? The team had to go and talk to customers, and if the customers didn't have the problem here, then the project would get killed. So a very simple experiment, talking to customers. Now that sounds trivial, but what do most companies do? They build a prototype before talking to customers. So you already wasted $10,000 or $10 million. So the second phase is then about testing the solution. So then they maybe build a prototype, a minimal viable product. And again, at the end, they need to show the evidence that customers actually like the solution or maybe even willing to pay. And again, they kill 74% of projects. So 10%, 19, make it through this funnel. And I talked to Uwe this summer. He said of those 19, actually only 2 became multi-billion-dollar businesses. So think of it, it's 1% that makes it to this size. Now, if you're a smaller business, I'll give you an example. You don't need to explore 200 because you're also not angling for $1 billion. But if you're angling for $1 billion in return in innovation, you probably need to have a funnel that broad. So most companies do not have this today. The companies we start to work with, they might go for 10, 20 per year, so they get closer to this. But now, here's the thing. First is customer, second is the value proposition, and the third is the solution, kind of willingness to pay for the solution. So now, that's a large company. Let me give you a small company, Swiss company. So this is a family-owned company. Mike and Julie took over from their father. And they have a company called Laura Star. Anybody ever heard of Laura Star? Well, if you want a really good iron, which I think many of you say, I don't care about steam iron, but they have high-end steam irons that they market around the world. Like really, really good and really, really expensive. They export to everywhere around the planet. So they said, we're going to innovate. And they came up with the Iggy. The Iggy is a handheld steamer. So you can travel with a steamer. But who wants to travel with a steamer? So they built the product. So they kind of got that one wrong. But then they said, oh, Eve and Alex are friends of ours. Like, how do we do this really? So we told them, what you really want to do is create a funnel. So they created that kind of funnel. And they came up with a different use for the Iggy. They realized people wanted to, it was COVID also, they wanted to sanitize their apartment. They wanted to kill germs. So at the beginning, they were a bit shy, and they said, you can iron your clothes or steam your clothes, and you can, disinfect your apartment. But they weren't confident enough to go full. But the lesson I want you to take away here is, this company, so not as big, would say, okay, we're going to start with this explore, exploit idea, and we have 14 ideas. But we're too small to explore 14 ideas. So they narrowed it down to 3. So 3 teams took 20% of their time to explore. One team looked at the hospitality industry. Because, COVID, you had to disinfect rooms really fast. How do you do that? Oh, there's this Iggy thing. Then they looked at hospitals. And then they looked at the mass market. And then they kind of figured out the mass market selling through the internet would be their best bet. So they went for that. That was then the first iteration of the Iggy. So they moved towards one that they executed, where they didn't go full on disinfecting the home. They still kind of wanted this steamer thing for the clothes. Now, if I look at the business model, so I'm going to sketch this out with the business model canvas. We have high-end devices for the mass market sold to retail. They earn money from transactional sales. So high-end devices, mass market, selling through retail, and direct, the internet, earning transactional sales. The products are here, the key activities are here, and this is the cost. Now, if you have this business model, the question to you, if you have this business model, what is the challenge? The challenge of this business model is, call it out. What do you see?
What value we give.
What value you're giving? Okay, that we could go deeper, but there's a problem with the business model, not the value proposition.
Competition barrier to entry.
Competition could be no recurring revenue. Okay, so we have one business model thinker in this room. Everybody else, now we got the answer. Everybody else has to catch up. So the problem with this is the non-recurring revenue. So there's this concept that one of our coaches came up with, is there are three types of revenue: variable, predictable, and fixed revenue. Okay? Now here's the challenge. The revenue from selling stuff is not as good as the revenue coming from other sources that are more recurring. So if you're looking at the valuation of a company, transactional revenues, or how he calls it, variable revenues, Michael Wilkins came up with this, is 3 to 5 times EBITDA. If you have predictable revenues like subscriptions, or fixed revenue like long-term service contracts, this is valued a lot more. So now, if I'm an owner of a company, what am I going to try to do? Not just to innovate product to create value, of course that's basics. I'm going to try to create more
Service.
predictable revenue, which could be service, doesn't have to be service. It could be other kinds of subscriptions. So in their case, they had this in mind, so they came up with the LoRa Star Aura. You'd say, oh, another device. That's true. But they had an idea, or they tried to find out, how could we turn the LoRa Star Aura not just into a device that we sell, but once they have it, we do something like the Nespresso machine. Who of you has ever seen a Nespresso, Swiss coffee machine? You have these pods that you put in. That's a recurring revenue, right? And it was protected until the patents ran out. So they said, we're going to copy the Nespresso business model and do the same thing. So they came up with the Aura, which looks like...
Introducing LoRa Star Aura, the advanced steam purifier. An innovation in lightweight, ergonomic, Swiss design, and engineering. For cleaning and purifying your home, powered by patented LoRa Star ThermoPur technology. LoRa Star Aura generates a constant flow, very high temperature, dry microfine steam. A 100% natural scented steam from a fragranced wooden tap. A device designed around living, purifying and cleaning any part of your home with no chemicals. And restoring the original finish of any surfaces. A way to live healthier and sleep better. Elevate your well-being at home. LoRa Star Aura.
Okay, so first thing here, do you see how they completely changed the market? Nothing around ironing your clothes or steaming your clothes. It was all about health and well-being, to disinfect your home, and the scent. So do you see this little thing here? You maybe saw it in the video. This little thing was actually not so easy to invent, because they said they want no chemicals. And how do you create scent without chemicals? Well, wood. But that's not easy, so that actually the home smells good. So they figured that out. But this means, what does this now mean? We have the Nespresso pod, the equivalent of the coffee pod. So in the business model, if we go back to this, they said, okay, it's still transactional, but we're going to create with this pod a continuous interaction, because they're going to come back to buy the little wooden things from us as soon as they're not useful anymore, okay? So we have now here this consumable, and with the consumable, we actually also have a lock-in, because you can't buy any other consumables, and they have patents on top of that. And most interesting, now they start to have a recurring revenue. Is it a big revenue? No. But here's the thing. Recurring revenues are exponential. You have one, you'll have it forever if they come back and use these things. So they go up much steeper than the transactional sales. So it's simple things like this that you can invent. They happen over time. But what you need to do is have the mindset to explore. Now, let me talk to you just quickly about AI. Because the business principles, I'm a big fan of the fundamentals. They don't change. The technology changes, and yes, this is a crazy, technology in terms of, I don't know if you use it, I use it, like it's insane what you can do. But we won't be able to reap the benefits of this if we don't do the basics of business. So if I show you this, some of you might have read this MIT report where they say, 95% of these generative AI things, they don't actually even work. My hypothesis is that most companies actually apply the rules of exploit here to explore, and that's why they can't use AI. That's why they're getting no results. If you kind of do what we're saying, you explore a lot, the winning ideas around AI will emerge. You don't pick the winning ideas. Yes, you can copy. That's always a legitimate strategy, but the winning ideas, they emerge, okay? So, if we look at the principles of business, let me see if my thing follows here. Business models, management mindset, and operating model. On the left-hand side is everything that changes through AI, and on the right-hand side is everything that stays stable. So left-hand side, yes, we will have completely new business models and completely new value propositions. A lot of it will be predictive, a lot of it will be ultra-personalized. What doesn't change? We still need to find profitable business models and create value for customers. So that sounds trivial, but that's the hard part. Finding value for customers and a business model that can scale. The technology is the easy part, to be honest. And it's actually very cheap for all of us to access. Okay, for $20, you get access to really cool stuff, okay? Management mindset. I believe the explorers will win over the exploiters. It's not going to be enough to be good at running a company. I think there's still opportunities to make a better business, but as we heard in the introduction, some of us are going to get irrelevant if we just run a business. So I like to say, if you're better managing a dying business, you're just more efficiently dying. Who of you is in an industry that is likely to get disrupted by AI? None of you? What? All of Okay, so if you're just improving your business, you're more effectively dying, okay? With your dying business, okay? Now that was not supposed to be a joke, because it is the reality of a lot of companies, right? So, on the right-hand side, this entrepreneurial mindset and leaders that are entrepreneurial, and I think a lot of you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be here, is going to dominate. This is the golden age of the entrepreneur, I believe. Okay? It's never been as easy to access a lot of these things. Operating model, everything's going to be faster. Everybody says that, but I think you've seen it with AI. It's just crazy. Also, how fast you can experiment. I'll get back to that. And then on the right-hand side, new growth comes from balancing explore, exploit. And you need to be able to experiment. So my next part here is on experimentation. Who of you today would say, whoops, you're already world-class at experimenting with new ideas, with new value propositions and new business models? Don't be shy. Who of you is already world-class? Who of you is already good? Come on, I don't believe that. Some of you are, right? Okay. Who would like to get a lot better? Okay, everybody else can leave now because that's what I'm going to talk about. You didn't have your hand up, it's going to be a bit boring. So, if we look at the process of innovation, there are two big categories that we need to be good at. The first is business design. And when I say business design, I mean what I've showed you before. Business models with recurring revenues. That's an example. Great value proposition, that's business design. And business design is all this, ideation and creativity, all that blah, blah, and then prototyping business model canvases and value proposition canvases. Then we look at, is this good? Then we assess. But here's the thing. And this happens a lot in established companies. We put an idea on paper and then we write a business plan. And the problem with business plans is what my friend and colleague Steve Blank says, is that there's a fine line between vision and hallucination. And again, nobody tells the CEO their baby's ugly, okay? So what we need to do is ask, what are the hypotheses? So we need to get into this testing mindset and test. If you don't do that, here's what you end up with. So we all kind of look up to Silicon Valley, but I'll show you the kind of the funny side of Silicon Valley. Who of you has heard of this company called Forward Health? Can't see it very well. Forward Health. They said we're going to build the autonomous doctor's office because doctors, nurses, admin is expensive. So you go to this doctor's office. There'd be no doctors, there'd be no nurses. You just interact with machines, right? The patient would come in. The problem was they opened these offices throughout North America and no patients showed up. Okay, so they were pretty empty. No doctors, no nurses, no admin, no patients. Okay, that's not a good business model. So they said, what do we say in Silicon Valley? We're going to pivot. So they pivoted and they said, if the patients don't come to us, we will go to the patients. So they created care pods. So they said these care pods, and these were AI-driven care pods, okay? They said, now people will come. Turns out nobody wanted these care pods, okay? So what happened is they went bankrupt. And I don't want to make fun of them because their vision was great. They wanted to make this healthcare a bit more accessible. How much money can you burn with a startup like this? What's your guess? Give me a number. 10 million? 200. 200 million? 300 million, not a couple of billion. But you know Silicon Valley, that's the AI age. The AI age, we burn tens of billions, right? So they just burnt $650 million. What a small amount, right? But it's complete waste. Now, you'd say, oh, but it was a startup, they didn't have very experienced people. Well, turns out their CEO was pretty experienced. Their CEO was reporting to Sergey Brin. So you'd say, well, that's an experienced person. What mistake did they make? Or what mistake did the VCs make? Who of you is a venture capitalist? What mistake did they make? They gave engineers a lot of money. Don't give engineers a lot of money. By the way, Vinod Khosla would frame this in a different way. He says, the more money you give a startup, the likelier they are to fail. Weird, right? But it's true. Because when you have little amounts of money, you will experiment, and you give them more, the more attraction you have, right? So the key to the new type of management for exploration, I'm not talking exploitation, different world. Exploration, you experiment. You ask, what's the hypothesis that I need to test? You run experiments. You learn from these experiments. And then you either go back and change the idea here, or you go on and test. Or you kill the whole project. Remember Uwe with Bosch? You kill the idea. That's okay. And that's actually the business model of venture capital. You know that most ideas are going to fail, so you invest in many. Okay? So that's the principle. Now, let's have a look at this, how this really works, okay? So, if we have explore, exploit, and we go into this left-hand side, there are three types of risks, three types of hypotheses you need to test for any new idea. Desirability, do people want it? Feasibility, can we actually build and scale it? And viability, can we make more money from it than we spend? Now, I'm going to talk about evidence-based. And I'm already going to tell you what evidence is not. So I worked with one of the top two food companies. One of the top two food companies. And I said, we need to test desirability, feasibility, viability. They told me, Alex, we test viability early on. I said, wow, you're pretty advanced. How do you test viability? And they told me, we make spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are not evidence in innovation. You know what a spreadsheet is in innovation? A fantasy made explicit. So you don't invest in the spreadsheet, but don't get me wrong. I want the spreadsheet at the beginning because I need to know, could this be a big idea? But everybody needs to know the spreadsheet is a fantasy. So what we do is we run experiments to support the spreadsheet with evidence. So if we do willingness to pay